Tell us about the community building aspect of local area coordination and the LAC's role.
One of the things that we really focus on when LACs first start in their journey as a local area coordinator is to get to know their communities well. That process involves getting out there and getting to know people. If we are going to link people with disabilities and their families to community, we certainly have to know what is available in that community. So that's the first approach in terms of working with communities, getting to know what's available and getting to know key people within that community. As we unfold or uncover people's needs, interests and strengths and their connections or their aspirations to connect to community, we then look at community in terms of how we can connect with those connections we've already made. The other thing that we spend a lot of time doing as local area coordinators is telling about people with disabilities and their families. So we spend a lot of time with community groups, talking about the needs of people with disabilities, their aspirations. And I've not, in all my experience, found a community that have said, no, we can't support people with disabilities. So I firmly believe communities can be welcoming and supportive of all people that live in that community. So with that belief, I would go out as a local area coordinator and spend time connecting with community, finding key people that I could build allegiance with or alliances with. And communities may respond by saying, we're not sure how we can do this. So my role as a local area coordinator would be to provide the information and support that they would need to become more welcoming for people with disabilities to be involved in community. It's about providing information to communities and supporting them to be more responsive and more welcoming. It's about how we provide information to families and people with disabilities about what is available in the community. And it's very much about how we can build partnerships with community in general and how we can be a part of that process.
Over the last 20 years, what have disabled people and families, whānau, said is the most important aspect of the LAC approach for them?
I think overwhelmingly families have talked about having a person in their lives, such as a local area coordinator, who can have a very strong relationship and connection, someone that they can trust, someone that they can get some emotional support, some connection with to help them in that journey. One other key aspect I think that comes out of that relationship is the importance of provision of information. Families have said over and over again, if I only had this information earlier, I could have made different choices and perhaps had more choices. And I think it is about choice. For too long, families, in a sense, have been kept in the dark. And if they're given the appropriate information, timely and both accurate information, it assists them to make choices and to be able then to access community. So they're probably the two. One about having someone they can trust in their lives to assist them in their journey and to help them plan for the future, to look at life in very much a different way. So for someone to help them explore possibilities, I think building possibilities is a real important role the LAC has. So for so many families, they become isolated and feel disconnected. And I think the LAC takes on a very important role in a sense of becoming a community navigator. And I think I give this analogy of, and I often do that in my training, about talking about an LAC being invited to get into a car with a family and go on a journey. So it's been welcomed into the car and been invited. The LAC would never take the driver's seat. They would always be either in the passenger seat or eventually get into the back seat. And the hope in the future is that families will be able to go on their journey without support from an LAC. But we are there to step in and step out as required for that individual and family.
Phil, thank you for your time and for sharing both information with us and something of your long experience with local area coordination. To finish, can you share a story with us that would show us something of the essence of the LAC approach?
One that really comes to mind is a story of a young man about the age of 22 who was having real issues about and conflict with his mother. His mother was in a new relationship, and the new partner could not get on with this person, and this young man couldn't get on with the new partner. So there was a lot of conflict. And the mum had phoned the LAC office to talk to the LAC about her concerns about her son being, somewhat disruptive in the family unit. Also that she wanted to see what other supports might be available to him. And so the first contact that the LAC had was to start talking through this. And LACs work in a very natural way, in a conversational way with families. And it's usually over a cup of tea at the kitchen table. And this young man, so the journey had started. But then only a matter of 2 weeks into this new relationship the LAC had with this family, Mum turned up very upset at the LAC office with 2 suitcases and the young man in tow and said, "I can't do this any longer. I can't cope with the situation. You take him." And the LAC invited Mum in and the young man, and to at least have time for Mum to explain the situation and for Mum to have her tears, to have a cup of tea, and to try and work out what could possibly come, or what options would be available to them at the time. The LAC said, "Look, I can't take your young son at the moment, but I'll look at some options, and I can do that tomorrow. Will you promise to take him home tonight?" And Mum had this sort of agreement with the LAC, said, "Well, if I leave his suitcases with you tonight, I'll take him home." So subsequent to that, the LAC then started exploring the community the next day. This particular LAC is very, very connected and has lived a long time in that community. So in that period of time has developed a whole range of support strategies for people, not funded or paid strategies, or if they are, they're very small amounts of funding. So the next day this young man was supported to go into emergency accommodation, and then the journey began between him and her about how they would try and build a good life together for this young man. So the young man was introduced to people in his community, and a house was found for him to live in. The LAC knew the neighbours, so she knew that community well, and she knew those neighbours would look out for him, and so she introduced him to the neighbours. She also then started exploring some other options about recreation, about the interests that he had. But this young man had some aspirations of his own. He started to talk about he would like a farm, he would like a motorbike, things that probably were well and truly out of his reach at this stage. So she looked at some of those things that she could work on, and he got connected to more and more people in his community. So he got to know the shopkeepers, the manager at the golf course, because he was interested in golf. He also then got introduced to the Recreation Sports Club, where he took an interest in basketball, and he did that for a while. And again, more and more connections were being made for him in his community. He started to observe Taekwondo and thought, that looks pretty impressive. And so he then participated in that particular activity. So over time, this young man got a whole range of connections in his community. He started playing sports, he started making friendships, and I think one of the stories she tells about him going to a barbecue one night, and he was talking to her about, well, it's important that you take some beers along, because people have a beer at a barbecue and you take some meat. So he did that, he bought those things, and he started sharing that mateship with friends and other people in his life. As time went on, he really loved his Taekwondo, became very good at it. He eventually was selected to participate in games in the Netherlands, so he represented Australia with a disability. And when that was announced, the golf club, where he was a part and a membership and had been for about at least a year, said they would fundraise for him. So the whole community became to support this young man. But I suppose the bottom line of all of this is that he was getting a really good life and building a good life for himself. The LAC was a support, obviously, to help some of that and a navigator for some of that. But in the end, we have a situation now where the LAC has very little contact with him anymore. He's living in his community. He's been supported by his community. They connect every now and again. They meet for a coffee, chat, how's it going? But in all intents and purposes, he's now a citizen of his community.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you for sharing both your knowledge and your long experience with local area coordination and providing the support that you have to us as we embark on the journey of introducing LAC in Western Bay Plenty.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm delighted to be here, and I wish you all the very best in the journey for local area coordination in the Bay and New Zealand into the future.